This episode of the 46 of 46 podcast is sponsored by Pure Outdoors. Camp comfortably with the world's best insulated tents and outdoors gear. Check out their tents, sleeping bags, pads, and more at cruaoutdoors.com. That's CRUA outdoors.com. Crua Outdoors, the best night's sleep you'll have in the wild. It's 20 degrees out here, and day one of the Northville-Placid Trail is officially underway. We're coming up to the Aluska Lean-To, walking along the cold river, and it is raging today. We're here at the Noah John Rondo Hermitage, 2 miles out from Catlin Bay at Long Lake, climbing up towards the scenic viewpoint, and it is steep. We're walking between the Seward and Santanoni ranges right now. Well, it is a winter wonderland back here at Duck Hole. Crossing the suspension bridge over the Sacandaga River, it's a quiet, peaceful evening here at Spruce Lake number 3. Well, we woke up covered in 2 inches of snow here at the Kelly Point Lean-To. Passing the Cedar River flow, sunny day at Stevens Pond. We're building our campfire early here at Silver Lake to fight off the bugs. Wow. Dude, I have no idea how we're going to cross this swamp. Just walking down the road here in Piseco. Well, I guess it's time to take off the boots and cross the West Stony Creek. 1 mile to Lake Placid, 1 mile left to Northville. You're listening to the 46 of 46 podcast, the Northville-Placid Trail edition. The Northville-Placid Trail, day 3. Cold River Lean-To number 2 to Lake Placid. April 16th, 2020. It was a cold 20-degree morning at the Cold River Lean-To number 2. Frigid, really. Fortunately, we were dry and there was no new snow last night, so we were already off to a better start than yesterday morning. We woke up around 6:30 a.m. again as the sun came up, and it took quite a few minutes for either of us to want to move or leave the comforts of our toasty sleeping bags. So we just laid there. And laid there. And laid there some more. Staring out the lean-to into the cold, snow-covered woods. Eventually, we mustered the courage to brave the elements, and we got up. Only to immediately regret the decision, but, we had miles to crush today, and it was time to get moving. Upon standing up and looking at my boots, I noticed they had an odd shine about them. So I picked them up off the lean-to shelf, only to realize they were frozen solid, like 2 ice-cold cinder blocks. Perfect. And so were Josh's. Given how my feet felt that morning, having developed a heel blister near the end of day 2, the thought of hiking the 13.5 miles to Lake Placid in these winter conditions was bad enough. But to add insult to injury, now I have to put my feet into completely frozen boots. Not the way I wanted to start day 3 here on the Northville-Placid Trail. Maybe I should have just put my boots in my sleeping bag with me too. Even though with my size and the layers, I barely fit in the bag by myself, but it probably would have helped. However, the socks and all the other things I had with me in my sleeping bag did dry very nicely. So that was a plus. So at least I wasn't also putting on wet socks. We both made the same breakfast as the day before. Josh whipped up some oatmeal and coffee, and I purposely burned a bagel in my camp stove and had it with some peanut butter. So we had another night with no major issues, no animals. In fact, we saw very few animals on the entire trip thus far, come to think of it. After I burned my bagel, I decided to keep the camp stove out to try to melt my boots a little bit. At least get that top layer of frozen off so they could slightly bend a little bit. We thought about building a fire, but we were out of camp wood, so we didn't do that. And since there wasn't a lot in the woods to begin with, it wasn't even worth trying. So I fired up my camp stove, held the boots over the top of it, and it actually started working. Decently, too. So I held the boots over the flame for a couple minutes until I ran out of gas, and it definitely loosened them up a bit, so I was pretty pleased with that. We had a smaller day compared to the other 2 ahead of us, but, we still had over 13 miles to hike, so after breakfast, we quickly got dressed, packed up camp, and it was time to hit the trail here on day 3 of the Northville-Placid Trail, Section 1. Destination, home to Lake Placid. Today's 13.5-mile hike would culminate at the Averyville Road trailhead in Lake Placid. We'd pass the infamous Duck Hole, then down to Moose Pond and Wanaka Falls, followed by the final 5.9-mile stretch walking along the base of Street and Nye Mountains and the Lake Placid staple Chubb River before coming out at the trailhead on Averyville Road. An exciting final day on the trail that would involve a whole lot of trouble, snow, and surprises still in store for us. But we'll get to all of that here on day 3 of the Northville-Placid Trail. We tied up our frozen boots, which felt like hell putting our feet into, might I add, strapped up our packs, which were now significantly lighter than they were 3 days ago, and started walking north away from Cold River Lean-To number 2. 7:47, time to leave Cold River Lean-To number 2 and start day 3 of the Northville-Placid Trail. We are heading to Lake Placid today, the last day of our first section of this trail. We've got about 13 and a half miles, so significantly less than the last 2 20-plus mile days. Should be good. We're going to go through Duck's Hole. We're currently over the bridge here on Cold River. Nice big wooden bridge. Heading to Lake Placid. Only a minute or two in, we came to the bridge over the Cold River where we quickly filled up our water bottles one more time with that delicious, untreated, raw Cold River water. Delicious and entirely safe to drink. The trail was covered in light snow, and fortunately the snow held up pretty well as we walked on it. We were not post-holing too badly during this stretch. The snow was holding. It wasn't really giving way as we step on it, as we climbed up towards Duck Hole, 1.5 miles away. The trail was pretty narrow for most of this walk, our elbows brushing against the snow-covered branches of small spruce trees lining both sides of the trail. So kind of a cold and slightly wet start as we began our day in the high 20s. Walking along the snow and icy trail to Duck's Hole. So far, not a lot of trail markers on this stretch of this trail. Usually there's quite a few of them, but not many over here. The trail's kind of nice though. You're walking on a very narrow trail in between spruce trees all around you. You know, hitting the spruce trees with your arms the whole time. But it's nice and green, so that's really nice. Cold River over here on my right. Icy, but we're helping it to melt faster here by stepping on it. Kind of nice little area back here, actually. Probably be at Duck Hole in 15 or 20 minutes. And as to be expected, it didn't take long into the day to hike the 1.5 miles before we came out to Duck Hole on our right, and we walked down the path to check out the area and the lean-to. We're 45 minutes in, and we just made it to the Duck Hole lean-to, which is easily the nicest lean-to so far that we've seen. Very nice, very well kept. Nice little spot here, very quiet back here. If that's what you're looking for, this is a good place to camp. Cool lean-to, and time to go. This is a popular choice for NPT hikers and locals to camp at, with an incredible lean-to since it's quite new compared to others on this trail, and in the Adirondacks as a whole. Duck Hole was originally a 10-foot-high dam built over 100 years ago in 1915 for the purpose of, as many Adirondack dams were, combating forest fires, but was destroyed in 2011 during Tropical Storm Irene, as were plenty of other popular dams here in the ADK. And sadly, the 61-acre lake is no longer there, and it's now more like a grassy meadow. And yes, it was indeed named Duck Hole due to the many different duck species found there. We sat down in the lean-to and took in the view for maybe 20 seconds with our packs on, and then we kept moving, since we'd only just begun for the day. There's a trail junction here to go over to Bradley Pond and the Santanonis as well. And once we left Duck Hole, we now entered the most challenging, obnoxious, and difficult stretch of our whole 3-day trip. The 4 miles of trail from Duck Hole to Moose Pond. Conditions were still full-fledged winter hiking as we walked through the valley of some unnamed 2,500 and 3,000-foot peaks. There's quite a bit of blowdown to navigate through over the next few miles, so be mindful of that as well. Less than half a mile after leaving Duck Hole, you'll come to a trail junction at a footbridge over the Roaring Brook. Be mindful here if you're hiking northbound. It's easy to see that nice footbridge and then just go right over it. However, this is the trail to Upper Works and it's marked with red trail markers. The Northville-Placid Trail goes left here along the river. So we just made our way through this big blowdown stretch. Tons of trees down, pretty messy.
And then we came to the river and a nice wooden bridge. And there are some red trail markers over here too. However, it's easy to go into zombie mode and just walk and follow the trail over that bridge because it looks very satisfying. However, it's not the right way to stay on the Northville-Placid Trail. You'll notice you turn left at the bridge and you'll see a blue trail marker going left, and the red trail markers go over the bridge. So don't be fooled. Go up the river. So don't zombie mode and cross over the river when you see that cool bridge. It's probably also a lot more obvious in the summer months since the NPT trail along the river was covered in enormous blocks of ice from the river breakup, and it didn't quite look like a trail. Though there are a couple blue NPT trail markers at this junction, so just remember to follow those markers along the river and do not go across. Unless you want to bail on the trail and go to Upper Works. If that's the case, have at it. Enjoy yourself. But if you're going to Lake Placid, go left. From here, we started climbing along the giant blocks of ice stacked every which way along the side of the river, hoping and praying each step would hold as we traverse along the riverbed. But the ice often gave out and those huge blocks went crashing down into the river. It was a bit sketchy to say the least, and it was foreshadowing what we had in store for us. The trail's going along the river after that bridge, but it's covered in enormous blocks of ice from the river breaking up. Kind of like what you see up in Alaska when the river breaks. Oh boy, geez Louise. So we're kind of traversing ourselves along these gigantic blocks of ice that keep breaking, as is the season. Oh boy. Pretty difficult and super sketchy. Yikes. This is wild. The trail's covered. You can see it, but it's covered. This area found us going up in the woods occasionally around some of these spots as we kept pushing up the river. And it was snowing and super cold at this point, and the snow had yet to melt back here at all, so the conditions felt like mid-January. We didn't need snowshoes, but close to it. It was slow moving as we continued hiking north, along the base of the Sawtooth Mountains to the west, with McNaughton Mountain to the east on our right. For the next couple miles, trail markers are extremely sparse, blowdown is fierce, and the trail is difficult to navigate. Or at least it was today in these conditions. We followed the trail markers and what appeared to be the snow-covered trail as closely as we could. Once we left the Roaring Brook was the point where the markers seemed to be gone forever. Either that or we were completely off trail, though I doubt it. And according to my GPS, we were definitely not off trail. We continued pushing north, periodically checking the GPS to make sure we're still close as we kept moving through the snow. A couple miles later, we were positive we were no longer on the trail. Though we were keeping between the two ridges moving north along the valley, so we knew we were at least close enough given the snow. It's an open forest, so like usual, it's easy to lose any trail in these types of woods, especially in the winter, and especially when there's been no sign of hikers here lately. We approached a giant beaver dam, and at this point we were pretty sure we weren't on a trail. So we auditioned a couple ways around the dam, and then eventually we backtracked a few feet before deciding to stay on the other side of the river and hug the base of the ridge to the east. Well, we're currently somewhere between Duck Hole and Moose Pond. No sign of anything resembling the trail at the moment, or any sort of trail marker. But according to my GPS and the route I have in there and the map, we're still pretty much on trail for the most part. We haven't seen a trail marker in probably a good mile. But we're threading the needle between these two little peaks here on both sides. And we're currently trying to figure out a way around this beaver dam that we have right in front of us. And I feel like Moose Creek will be right around the bend on the other side of this stretch. So hopefully it is, and then that can definitely pinpoint exactly where we are on the map. But we shall see. This stretch has been a doozy ever since we left Duck Hole. But hopefully we'll see some trail markers soon, or the Moose Creek, and then we'll know we're close and exactly where we are. Continuing north. We knew basically where we needed to be while looking at